Thank you, Melvin, and a very good morning to everyone. I'm sure after the very interesting networking events all through the evenings, this morning, I'm very glad that all of you are here on this very important topic. And as this year's topic is on ambition meeting action, for the first time, we have worked with Marina Bay Sands to tune up the temperature and aircon in the entire conference from the usual 17, 18 degrees to now 25. I think next year we can do 26 or 27. There will be cost savings as well, so going green is not more expensive. MBS assures us that there's lots of cost savings in this, 3 to 5% of energy demand. And here we have chairman of our National Environment Agency here. We've been trying to do this because many guests have come to Singapore and said there's summer outside and winter inside. So we are addressing some of that feedback, and we hope that over time you enjoy yourselves, let your hair down, no coats and ties over time, and you can be more comfortable amongst friends like a family. So on this, I think quite clear that climate change is a real and existential threat. Where we are today is not on a good trajectory. With all the pledges on the table for the Paris Agreement, we are on track, in fact, to exceed the temperature goals defined in the Paris Agreement. So what it means is that next 10 to 20 years, in fact, what we all decide today as a generation will lock in the climatic effects for the next few generations. So we are here quite close, and scientists have told us that the 1.5 degree temperature goal may well be exceeded in the next 10 to 20 years. And what that means, to put it in perspective, the last time Earth was so warm, 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, was about 2.5 million years ago in the Quaternary period. So extreme weather conditions, all of you are very familiar, from left to right. For the first time last year, this is the Yangtze River in China, third world largest river system, supporting about 400 million people. For the first time, parts of the Yangtze River was dried up because of a drought. And from those from North America, you have seen all the cold solar polar vortexes coming down all the way to the south. And on the far right, this is what is happening now this week. In the past few weeks in Southeast Asia and in India, there's a heat wave going on. Temperatures are about 45 to even 50 degrees. I heard from many of my friends that they are trying to fry eggs now using pans without cooking. Maybe that saves some emissions, but at the end of the day, the heat waves is a particular concern, especially for Southeast Asia. Singapore is no different. We are particularly vulnerable to climate change as a low-lying state, with about 15 to 20% of the entire population in very low-lying areas. We've done our temperature measurements. The daily mean temperature has gone up between 1.4 to 4.6 degrees Celsius. We've done also our sea level rise projections. What we do here in Singapore, every few years, when the IPCC, this is the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, when they do the global studies, our scientists here downscale it to city-size level so that we know what is happening in Singapore. And we've been taking measurements for quite a long time now. The sea level rise on average is 1.2 to 1.7 mm per year, and we are projecting up to a meter rise by 2100. And this is assuming no discontinuous effects. I know our colleagues in the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact has been tracking the 16 tipping points around the global systems, and probably 2 or 3 of them are near their tipping points. Of course, those in Singapore, record rainfall since 1869. This is the year of the water rabbit, but the water rabbit, I think, has brought more rain than expected. And we are glad today, many companies have pledged their net zero targets, some 2030, some 2050. I think we had good news coming from the US for many of the US retailers. And as UN SecGen has highlighted, to address climate change, we need to do everything all at once. And I think it's important endeavor that each company adopt a net zero target. The cost of fossil fuels, despite the situation in Europe, I think we are also approaching a very important tipping point in the global energy system. That the cost of solar in practically all countries with wind and solar as well have gone down below fossil fuels. That is the same for Singapore as well. And I think more renewables will be added to the global system than fossil in the coming years. Singapore, of course, is committed to decisive climate change. Deputy Prime Minister Wong has highlighted our net zero target last year. That means for the whole Singapore economy, net zero emissions by 2050. For government, it's 2045, and for MPA, it'll be earlier. And we decided to pick emissions at about 60 million tons around 2030. It used to be 65 million. I think we can do it probably around 2030, around 60 million. And what does that 5 million mean? Is about 2/3 of our land transport emissions. So in Singapore, I think because of the early actions that we have taken, I think we can peak at a lower level. And by peaking at a lower level, we can reach net zero much earlier. We've also highlighted our hydrogen strategy. So last year, we also published our national hydrogen strategy, where we are looking at hydrogen sources, producing electricity from overseas through electrons, or using renewables from overseas to bring fuels to Singapore. And the best carrier amongst this is ammonia, which is why this week, all of you have been hearing quite a lot about these fuels as well. And for looking into the future, I will start a bit about adaptation first, because the less that you do for mitigation or to cut climate change actions, then you have to do more for adaptation. This is adapting to the ill effects of climate change. Of course, there are heat impacts, which is important for Singapore, but at the same time, rising sea levels. So for MPA, we are not only a port regulator, a facilitator, we are also supporting of many of our actions for Maritime SG. But at the same time, we also do land reclamation, because we prepare the port, and the preparations for the port starts today. So we have many of our experts here who have worked with us. The first 5 berths of PSA is already operational, and we have already exceeded more than 1 million TEUs. So the Tuas port, which will be developed from the 2030s to the 2040s, will in total have a net total handling capacity of 65 million TEUs. So we are doing quite a lot of work there, but at the same time, preparing for adaptation. So all the Tuas new port area is built at least 5 meters above sea level. We don't think this is enough if the world does not act on climate change. We are continuing reviewing our process. So our engineers are not resting on their laurels. What you see here is in the picture is a 10-story tall caisson. These are 10-story tall concrete blocks that forms the finger, and there are 221 of them in the Tuas Phase 1 alone. They have many more going ahead, and we are now looking at 120 years later. I'm sure with biomedical engineering and science development, many of you will still be around. Some of us may not be, but the engineers are now looking at 120 years ahead. And long-term planning is critical for Singapore, given the scarcity. And the engineers are now finding themselves to make critical choices now, and the choices that we make today on what goes on land, how to monitor these caissons, will save billions of dollars for the Singapore and Singapore economy and our future generations. On mitigation, there are 3 broad areas. I'll highlight them. One is the port and cruise terminals. The second one is our domestic hovercraft, pleasure craft, and tugboat systems. And the third one is, of course, international shipping. On the first one, all our port and cruise terminal operators are bounded by our national target. They have pledged their net zero emissions. They are going through their plan, and MPA is having annual meetings at least once with them to run through their plans, make sure the implementation is done well. Solar panels are coming out all over the port. The port is not only a port core for the vessels, but it's also an energy import system for our economy. So different solar panels are up. We are looking at energy storage systems as well. And you may have heard that Disney would have a cruise line here. They are looking at green methanol. So we need to make sure that these infrastructure are ready as well. The second area is on hovercraft, pressure craft, and tugboats. Previously, some people may think that they are part of international shipping. They are part, instead, of the national target. So pleasure craft, hovercraft, and tugboats within our ecosystem are part of the national target. And what it means is they have to be net zero by 2050. So if you work backwards, for the tugboats and pleasure craft, we will still take a year to learn about them to see what can be done. But we have done good analysis for the hovercraft, and to avoid stranded assets, to optimize the assets, and to ensure that they have a useful lifespan. We have now specified in Parliament for the first time this year that all new hovercraft will have to be fully electric, capable, and not just ready, capable of using B100, or be compatible with net zero fuels such as hydrogen from 2030. And we also encourage everyone with new hovercraft coming in to tell the MPA early so that we can work with you and make the designs even better. Because once the vessels are built, it's very difficult and very expensive to do a retrofit. So we encourage everyone to inform the MPA early. We know some of you are thinking about this already. So the latest date to do so is January 2027. for vessels coming in 2030. It doesn't mean that your vessels can't come in. It just means that we will take a longer time to discuss with you. The yards must be ready so that they are net zero capable. And what we also want to do, we have brought our MPA team to our local shipyards. And the picture on the right, this is our very first full electric ferry, the Penguin Refresh, done by our local company using lithium MMC batteries. We have been looking at all the battery systems. This vessel travels at 21 knots. And what the engineers have done is to reduce the weight by up to 30% compared to a conventional craft. So the upfront cost is still higher because of development costs and many of the engineering costs that goes to it. But there are life cycle cost savings because each month, using electricity is cheaper than using MGO and many of the marine fuels. So we encourage all our local players to work with us and get the economics right. Now moving on to international shipping, we all know that the new fuels that are coming on board, be it methanol, ammonia, or hydrogen, are all less energy dense compared to the conventional fuel. And what that means is if we just swap the engines from one to the other, vessels will need to be bigger or you will lose cargo space. So what we want to do, this is like someone running for a marathon. You have to trim your weight down first, become more energy efficient, and then you can run better and faster. So what we are doing is to focus quite a lot of the initial efforts to get the design right, to reduce weight and be more energy efficient. So we have worked with many of our additive manufacturing players to set up the world's first additive manufacturing facility within the cargo complex. So just last week, we have launched, thanks to our scientific researchers and the scientific community, 2 new satellites from India. And these satellites will probably take some months to warm up and get themselves ready. And we can start to test satellite VDES with you, so that beyond the AIS systems that we have today, you can call the Port of Singapore earlier, we can arrange for just-in-time operations, or you can arrange for a call, maybe ship supplies can be done a bit earlier. Seafarers don't quite like that because they don't want us to be too efficient so that they don't spend time in Singapore. But rest assured, we'll have a good training program and good recreational program for them. The robots can do the work, and hopefully over time, drones can pre-qualify some of these, and you no longer need a boat to go out for smaller items. Drones can fly to them. The Maritime Drone Estate that we've announced earlier this week, I think will facilitate many of this. The second area is on route planning. So you have seen this very interesting designs about wind rotors and wind sails. In the Atlantic Ocean, the winds are north and south, so the wind rotors work very well. Unfortunately, in our area, it's very complicated for trade winds, but that means it's also very good for maritime AI. So MPA, together with our research institutes, have started a maritime AI program, and we welcome all of you to work with us to use AI into such energy efficient measures, use IoT so that the route can save fuel as well. And if you can save fuel from weight reduction and energy efficiency, I think paying a bit more later on for the new fuels as they begin to bring in can help the economics very much better. And for each of the new fuels, biofuels, for those in Singapore, you know, is gaining traction from industry. What the MPA would do with all our research institutes and standard setting body is to make sure that we have the standards ready. We have the world's first provisional standard now for biofuels up to B50. Before we have the standards, I think the industry was mixing B3, B7, B10. Now with up to B50, I think B24 is now being sold in our market quite readily. We are working with many ship owners and various agencies as well to raise the provisional standard from B50 to B100, and we'll update this when we are ready and bring this to the IMO. And as a result, I think biofuels is gaining very good traction and comments. I think the assurance studies are going on well. And last year, biofuels volume that was sold in Singapore, although still small on relative terms to our conventional bunker, is 8 times higher than that of LNG. And looking at just the stats over the past few months, I'm sure this year will beat the volumes last year. We also have increasing order book for methanol and ammonia. I think many of our companies here are represented. There are quite a lot of vessels coming on board. What is critical for Singapore is that shipbuilding capacity globally is concentrated right now in China, in Korea, and Japan. Over 94% of all new builds are done in these countries. And what it means is, as they sail past Singapore, no different from the past, when they sail past Singapore on their way to Europe, I think will be a very good place to do trials as they take delivery by European and other owners. So But storage, safety, and training are very important. So for methanol, the picture on the right shows you what a methanol fire looks like. You may not be able to see it because it burns very cleanly with a clear blue flame. It's less hot, with less soot, so you can't smell it as well, you can't feel it as well. And training for the seafarers is thus a very important endeavor. Even as the new ships are well designed, SecGen was with us yesterday. We had 28 agencies, so we brought together all the researchers working in Singapore on Plume Cloud modeling, all the researchers looking at hydrodynamic modeling together, and the other group was all our security agencies, from the Navy to the Home Team to the Civil Defense, coming together with Methanol Institute and all our companies who are interested in this, to do what we call a tabletop exercise. I think those in Singapore would know, before you go for your live firing, what we do is you look at safety-related standards, you do weapon handling, after that you do blanks, you walk the ground before you do live firing. So it's the same similar process that's being done here for many of the new fuels. So I'm glad to say that after the tabletop exercise, I think there were quite a lot of questions thrown up. Both sides are now discussing. I think we'll be ready for ground deployment exercise. These are component exercises that we do out at sea, so that we test all the operating procedures before we do our very first methanol bunkering at scale on the second half of the year. I'm very glad to have ABS, Mitsui, and also Maersk and our local bunkering players supporting this. And this will be a very good test of the entire ecosystem, not only from ship owners to suppliers, to the researchers, and the emergency response in our team. We are running all these exercises so that we can get our entire ecosystem ready, and in Singapore will be ready to share some of these lessons with all our trading partners and also at the IMO in future. For ammonia, I think there will be a lot of interest, so we have organized the entire afternoon lunch session to talk about ammonia. There are various studies that are ongoing. Some are by companies, some are by our research institutes, and they cover a wide range of areas, from shore to ship, ship to ship, SimOps, which covers simultaneous operations with containers. Some of them come with mitigation and responses. So there's a wide range of studies being done. And what we want to do is to ask the researchers of all these areas to highlight to you, share with you what is ongoing. And in Singapore, we now have an expression of interest for ammonia bunkering and also ammonia power generation, up to 50 megawatts and up to 0.1 MPTA for ammonia. Ammonia is already brought in to the Vopak terminal in Singapore, but doing 10,000 tons per year is very different for 1 MPTA. And I think in a few days' time, we welcome all the EOI submissions. And after that, we'll take a few months to evaluate this, and we'll aggregate demand and work with each of our players on the ammonia trials. To do this well, I think going forward, we have to rethink our energy approach to catalyze innovation and to forge partnerships, both at the local and at the international level. I'll highlight a bit about each of them. So in Singapore, we used to be part of the energy report, and when we wrote in the report, we always write that in Singapore, tidal is not possible because you need 3 to 5 meters per second of hydrokinetic energy or tidal, which we don't have in Singapore. So after many years of working through this, we've asked the hydrographic department in MPA to map out all the sea resources, and we have found some good currents. Hopefully they stay and not affected by climate change. And we are now testing, finally, one of the world's first micro hydrokinetic energy turbine. Is now in the water off Raffles Lighthouse, so by next year, hopefully we'll tell you whether it works or not. And I think because it can spin at 0.6 meters per second, it will allow us to harness some kinetic energy from the waters in Singapore as well. So the seascape of Singapore will begin to transform. It's not just for the maritime space, but also to produce energy for the maritime community. We are also working with all of research institutes and the government agencies to study solar deployment potential. So for all of you who have been going around Marina South Pier, West Coast Pier, and Changi Point terminal, today you can think of it as an open car park. So if we were to put solar panels on it, I think it would be much better. We are now studying the various potential, looking at how it works, and over time, we will give out various expressions of interest to deploy large-scale solar over all our piers. The next area on catalyzing innovation and proliferating low and new carbon technologies and fuels. I think electrical charging is very important. I think all of you have been traveling, you will know that if you travel to different places, having different adapters is a painful exercise. So we did not manage to harmonize this for the ICT industry. I hope we can do so at least for the local domestic hovercraft industry. So like what we did for solar panels, in Singapore, we did not need to have feed-in tariffs. What we did was we used Tengah Reservoir, we put in place and invited over a 2-year time frame solar panel manufacturers so that you can see whether these solar panels work in Singapore or not. And then after a while, we will know which panels works the best, and we specify a certain performance standard. Likewise, for electrical charging, MPA will be giving out an expression of interest later the year to try these 2 sites, Marina South Pier and Pasir Panjang Ferry Terminal, where many of the hovercraft, pleasure craft, and tugboat community will pass by to have a test bed for the electrical charging. So any company with electrical chargers all around the world, we feel free to put them here, test it in the local environment, and we'll be able to set local standards for electrification. The next thing that we will do is to give another expression of interest to support this transition in 3 stages. First, we will invite academics, shipping companies, manufacturers to design the most efficient hovercraft in Singapore. Because renewable energy is a limitation, we will put these models to the test. We have, I think, quite a lot of capabilities and facilities in our research community. So if you can get the most efficient design, then this will reduce energy costs for everyone. And after that, we will work at aggregating demand, meaning if 10 boats can do the work of 15 boats, if there's today already, when you travel, there's already code share amongst the airlines, there's already Grab and Uber for the land side, but on the sea side, what is the equivalent? If more boats can do the work and increase utilization, what it means is we can demand aggregate, manage the upfront cost better, and be able to do green financing. So MPA, together with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, have done many workshops on green financing, and we hope that by doing this, this can become what is done at the public sector. So we hope that this EOI in various stages, I think will help to manage costs much better and have a much better orderly transition. And if this works, I think many countries can do this as well, and we will update these results also at the IMO. And what are some of these capabilities in the scientific research community? So I share with you this example. I call it a giant bathtub. You can create waves up to 1 meter and up to a depth of 3 kilometers. So this is in the National University of Singapore. It took us several years to do this at a quite hefty cost of more than 100 million that the government has invested, because we are very serious in working with our maritime and ocean-going community. So courtesy of PSA Marine, Wärtsilä, and this technology center for offshore and marine, we are now able to run tests before the boats are built, before the vessels are built, on monitoring in calm waters, in currents, and to combine cyber-physical models so that we can test for cyber-related attacks as well. And I'm glad that the first digital twin has been able to, the results are quite good in that the models will predict a digital twin, and then we can see whether the physical movements match with the digital twin. And I'm glad that with the work from Wärtsilä and TCOMS in NUS, we've been showing good results, and this was, I think, augur very well when we move to remote pilotage in some years to come. And of course, as we do this, there'll be lots of opportunities to have startups, to have enterprises. And in Singapore, we have something called Pier 71. So this was the last Pier 71 challenge. Every year we do this. We're having more and more SMEs, startups interested in this space, both local and overseas. We treat them as our own, and we will find new ways for smart port challenges to look at the digitalization and decarbonization objectives. Just this morning, forging standards is very important. I think I've told all the 8 class societies, sometimes they do compete, but to get everyone to collaborate, I think is an important endeavor. I've spoken to all the group CEOs and presidents of the 8 recognized class societies in Singapore. MPA will join the MTF as an associate member, and then thereafter, in this effort, bring together all the 8 class societies recognized in Singapore to work together on interoperable standards for electrification, for bunkering, for methanol, for ammonia, so that we can then have a set of harmonized standards test the trials here, and then bring these results overseas in time to come. So I've spoken to Nick from Lloyd, who is chair of the International Association of Classification Societies. I know there are still some class societies out there which are not operating in Singapore yet, but we'll work with them as well, keep them updated so that we can bring everyone on board before we go to the IMO. So later today, I think we will sign this letter of intent with all the 8 class societies in Singapore. And to forge standards, you've heard about the Green and Digital Shipping Corridor on Monday. I won't belabor it, but I think Singapore will be signing Green and Digital Shipping Corridors with practically all our trading partners in time to come, because these act as good nucleating ecosystems to bring together shippers, cargo owners, consumers, so that we can test and try many new methods to decarbonize, and I'm glad that our partnership with Rotterdam is working very well. Many workshops are being done. We don't want to say so much of it yet because a lot of work is ongoing, but at the right time, I think we'll update many of the results. And likewise, we will do this with the Port of LA and Long Beach. At the IMO, we have also worked with Norway and the IMO SecGen to introduce a Next Gen Connect, where we look at methodologies. I'm very glad the Silk Alliance submission by Lloyd has been the winning entry, and we can work with them as well as we promulgate this to the Asia Pacific. On the bottom photo, you have seen that the Tuas Reclamation Project has just won the World Federation of Engineering Sabah Prize Award. I've spoken to many of our engineers. They are very thankful of this, but we've decided to donate all the prize money in full to UNESCO, WFEO, for climate change related education and also national engineering programs in the small islands and developing states. So this will benefit the introduction of curriculum on engineering and also climate change in many small and developing island states in which Singapore is a member of, such as Fiji and Mauritius. So you know that this is an important year. MEPC 80 is ahead. The full team for MPA. We usually don't attend many of the ISWG and MEPC meetings as such numbers, but this year is an important year. We are working with many of our friends and colleagues from all around the world so that IMO can enhance the current target, which is 50% below 2008 levels by 2050. And there's much work to be done in the next few months. I think our team will spend lots and lots of time in London. Han Chiang, bottom right, he's now vice chair of MEPC. We're very honored by the support of all the member states. And I think we'll work through the ISWG process, MEPC, and then bring it to, and then discuss relevant things at council as well. So this year will be an important year for the IMO. Singapore stands ready in full support of IMO's plans to enhance the initial IMO strategy. So for firms in Singapore, I'm sure you can make a guess of how much investments are there for decarbonization. I think we have more and more. I think the interest shown by every one of you in the room, I think will already be a very good proxy for this. So last year alone, $1.4 billion in investments was committed. We think these numbers will grow. As we conduct the maritime census, we've tracked these numbers year on year. And 85% of these companies already track their emissions or have plans to decarbonize. So we'll work with these companies to raise their capabilities and support them in their manpower training. And last but not least, we've upgraded the Sustainability Office in MPA to now a full-fledged maritime decarbonization division. I've told the organization that digitalization and decarbonization are critical, so every MPA officer, depending on where their work is, will have aspects of digital and decarbonization. We hold weekly meetings such as this to hope to drive the agenda forward for not only MPA, but for Maritime Singapore and also at the IMO level. So last but not least, I thank all of you. So whether you are testing out new technologies above the air or in space, on the sea surface, where you have many digital technologies coming around, or to develop new energy systems, or even beneath the waters of Singapore, we welcome you. And this is hopefully the place where we will shape the future of the maritime community. And as Singapore, sitting at the east and the west as an important center, there are, of course, important leaders on both sides of the Pacific. So the one on the east have highlighted that when you cross the river, you need to feel the stones as you cross the river. And on the west, I think there are important sayings by a former president to talk about that reaching a port, you must sail, sail and not drift, sail and not let anchor. So in that regard, Singapore as the center for the east-west trade routes and the important international maritime center, we are very heartened that many of you have found Singapore as your second home. So for this week, I think with just slightly more population than many of our friends in Scandinavia, because all of you are here, in Europe as well. And in future, I think the maritime community here will grow over time. And I look forward to meeting every one of you. And after these few days of work in the mornings, I think the evenings are much more interesting. And please enjoy the networking. And for those of you who have come through all the way to Singapore, I wish you all of you a pleasant stay in Singapore and a safe flight home. Thank you.